found my wife in bed with my brother. This all happened 7 hours ago, and I haven't slept since. Here's the long story short. I'm in the military and live on a military installation. My wife and I have been married for just over 2 years. We just had a son who is 3 months old. My wife has a terrible drinking problem. If she drinks any kind of liquor, she becomes a completely different person, like a demon. It's as if something is mentally wrong with her when she drinks. She's had this problem ever since we got together, but over time it has only gotten worse. When she drinks, she'll break TVs, punch me, kick me, slap me, and even force sex, only to beat me again until she passes out on the floor and wets herself. One time, she went to our neighbour's house at 2 a.m, trying to make friends, and they ended up calling the police. This is just one example of the nightmare she becomes when she drinks. I refuse to buy her liquor. Beer and wine seem to be okay. But occasionally, if she finds a way to get liquor, there's no taking the bottle away from her. After finishing my first contract, we moved duty stations, and I invited my brother to live with us and pay rent so he could grow up and get out of my mother's house. I figured it would be a good way for him to learn responsibility. He's pretty much a slacker, but he did get a job and paid rent on time. I only charged him half of what it would normally cost to live here, so he could save up enough to eventually move out and start his own life. He's been with us for a year now. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, he got fired. He's also an alcoholic and says he has to drink himself to sleep because he has insomnia. The three of us usually got along pretty well. We'd play board games, disc golf, and cook for each other. But recently she started hanging out with him in his room every so often because he has liquor. I expressed my concerns to both of them and even threatened divorce if she kept drinking. Things seemed fine again after one rough night. Last night, she had a bottle of cheap wine, which is usually okay. We had sex, and then she took a bath around 1 a.m. I fell asleep while she was in there, only to wake up 2 hours later to my son screaming. I got up, took care of him, and put him back to sleep. But she was nowhere to be found. I walked into my brother's room, and there she was, in his arms, lying on his chest. I can't feel. I can't think. I can't breathe. I don't know what to do. I kicked my brother out without letting him grab anything. I told him to run, and he did. My wife won't stop crying. My son won't stop crying. And I'm in a world of pain. Wow, I'm so sorry you're going through this. That's an incredibly painful betrayal. It must feel completely unreal that your wife and your own brother could cross that line, especially after all you did to help him out. I can only imagine how overwhelming this must be for you, especially with a newborn to think about too. Story 2. My wife cheated on me with her co-worker. My wife, 42, and I, 44, have been married for 19 years and together for 25. We have 3 wonderful kids, all under the age of 14. In 2015, she lost her mother to cancer, and in 2016 her father also passed away from cancer, sending her into a deep depression. For the next 2 years, I took care of the kids while she worked. During this time, intimacy between us faded, and she struggled to find happiness in anything. Because she wasn't talking to me, I started playing video games after the kids went to bed as a way to cope. After about 2 years, she began to come out of her depression. She talked more, wanted to spend time with the family, and we became physically intimate again. Things seemed to improve, but then I lost my father, which sent me into a depression since we were very close. Like my wife before, I withdrew, played video games more, and distanced myself from her. Despite this, I still told her I loved her, gave hugs, and tried to keep up with date nights. We began sleeping in separate rooms because one of our sons had a medical condition requiring us to monitor him at night, so I slept in his room. I moved my Xbox there and played until I fell asleep. Then COVID happened. The kids' school went remote, and my wife started working from home. Her job required her to source supplies to reopen her business after restrictions lifted, so she worked closely with a colleague. After a few months, she became more distant and stopped communicating with me. I tried to keep the connection alive by telling her I loved her and buying small gifts to show my appreciation. We decided to keep our kids learning remotely for the 2020 to 2021 school year due to our son's condition. I was so busy with the kids' schooling that I didn't fully notice how much our relationship was deteriorating. Intimacy faded again. That summer, in 2021, I started driving for Lyft to help with finances, working on days she worked from home so she could be near our son's school. In the fall of 2021, I picked up a woman from the airport who was discussing her plans to meet her affair partner AP on a business trip. She mentioned her husband was too busy to notice her cheating and that they hadn't had sex in over a year. It hit me hard because her story sounded uncomfortably similar to our own situation. I tried to be more affectionate and loving, even though I'd always been affectionate. But her distance only seemed to grow. I wrote her a letter telling her I loved her, that I could feel the distance between us, and that I wanted to work things out. She said she'd try to be better. For the next year, however, she showed little affection and said she didn't want intimacy due to the effects of her depression medication. We barely held hands, and she only said, "I love you," if I said it first. In the car, she would sleep to avoid talking. Then came D-Day, May 4th of this year. My wife went into the office, and I texted her throughout the day, but she didn't respond. Later she called and said she hadn't received my text due to poor signal. She suggested using Google Chat so the messages would appear on her work computer. I sent her messages there, but again, no response. That night, after the kids were asleep, she took a shower. Feeling suspicious, I looked at her phone. I saw my messages were indeed delayed until she left the office, but on Google Chat I found her messages to another man. They were filled with May the 4th Star Wars memes, but I hadn't received any from her, even though I'm a fan. Their affair had been going on for almost 3 years, with countless "I miss you" and "I love you" messages. I was devastated. Her affair partner had moved to Kansas in 2020, but returned to the office 1 week each month. As they worked together on reopening their business, he began flirting. Unlike before, when she'd shut down advances from other men, she flirted back. Lunches turned into visits to his hotel for midday sex, and she told me she was working late to spend more time with him. I even found a message to her friend admitting that the sex wasn't better. She just craved the attention. I screenshot everything to myself but didn't confront her, as I needed her help with an upcoming surgery. After my surgery, we decided to move closer to family, but she barely helped me look for houses. In October, I checked her phone again. It seemed the affair ended in June before my surgery because he was upset she was taking time to care for me and the kids. I'd wondered why she became more affectionate and interested in intimacy after my recovery. Last week, we had a huge argument because she was being distant again and avoiding communication. I finally yelled and told her I knew she had cheated with a coworker. She denied it and accused me of overreacting until I showed her the evidence. She stopped yelling, broke down crying, and I left to stay at my sister's house. I returned home for the kids' sake, especially with Christmas around the corner, but I told her I planned to file for divorce after the new year. She cried and asked who would drive her to work, help with the kids, and support her. I told her to ask her affair partner. She suggested we could work it out with marriage counselling, but I'm done. I plan to seek full custody, alimony, and child support when I file. Looking back, I feel like I wasted 25 years. I can't believe you're going through this. It sounds incredibly difficult. It's heartbreaking to hear how much you've tried to support your wife through her struggles, only to have her betray your trust like this. I can only imagine the pain you're feeling right now, especially with everything you've invested in your marriage and family. Story 3. I caught my wife cheating after 15 years of marriage. I, M45, have been married for 15 years to my wife, F44. We have 2 kids and I don't know how to really start this, so here we go. My wife and I were childhood friends, but we weren't really close. We didn't notice each other much until high school, after mutual friends started dating, which meant we saw each other a lot more. At first we were friends, but after I grew a pair of guts, I asked her out and she said yes. A little confession. I had a crush on her before our friends started dating, but I kept it to myself. We dated during our last 2 years of high school and planned to go to the same college. However, after figuring out that her school didn't offer the same program I wanted, I had to head to another school. I should have seen this as a problem when the school I picked had her program, but she told me that it wasn't a place she could see herself. We tried long distance for a while, but it didn't really work out, so we called it quits while we were in college. After a few years, I graduated, and we surprisingly bumped into each other during a visit back home. A conversation sparked up, igniting our interest in each other again. It wasn't long before she moved into my apartment. Looking back, it seemed pretty fast, but I can't lie. It just felt right at the moment. My career was going well, and she was just about to graduate, so everything seemed perfect. During this time, she had a male friend whom I referred to as him. He was extremely attractive, definitely the kind of guy who could be a player, and I didn't trust him. Okay, I'll be honest. I didn't trust him at all, and I hated that my wife was friends with him. We had many conversations about this, and she promised me, swore to God himself, that she had no romantic feelings for this guy, and that they were strictly friends. She insisted that if I really trusted her, I wouldn't worry, so I tried to believe her. Now let's fast forward. My work and home life were competing for my attention. The kids needed me, but I had work obligations. I'm not going to lie, I made some mistakes, like leaning too hard on her or not expressing how much I appreciated her, but I always thought it was implied. One day, I came home from work, and as I walked in, I heard her laughing and giggling. When I entered the kitchen, I noticed she was cleaning the dishes, and him was sitting at the island talking to her. As I walked into the room, a slight quietness filled the space, almost like I was a guest in my own house. They both quickly greeted me, but the silence felt heavy. Now, him and I weren't friends, but we had had a conversation about my uncomfortable feelings regarding him and my wife. It was short and simple, and looking back now, he probably got a good laugh at my expense. After a few minutes, he left, and it was just me and my wife. I don't know if she was already with him or if she was just mad at me for not helping out enough, but when I tried to get close to her or show her some intimacy, she rejected me, saying, "I'm tired. I had the kids all day," or she would start a random argument about something trivial. This has been happening for the last 6 months until I finally asked, "Is there someone else?" That's when all hell broke loose. She called me every name in the book and even brought up some insecurities I had. If that wasn't a sign, she didn't talk to me for about a week after that. At this point, I knew something was going on, so I needed to figure it out. I booked her a spa day on my day off and made sure she was completely pampered. While she was out of the house, a buddy of mine who's an electrician, and I placed small cameras around the house. Now before you judge me, I wouldn't have done this if I had been thinking straight. I was hoping that after a month or 3, I wouldn't see anything, and I'd realise I was a dumbass with a great woman who loved me. When she came home, smiling and gave me some attention, I thought maybe the spa day was all she needed to unwind. It felt almost like it used to while it lasted. After 2 months of recording, I hadn't found anything, and I was so happy, feeling like a fool for putting those cameras in my house. I stopped watching the footage for a while. They just became out of sight, out of mind. Until one day I got a notification on my phone saying that something in the house was ajar or something like that. So I thought I'd check the cameras since I could see if one of the kids had broken something. As I flicked through the footage, I stopped at my front door, noticing a black pair of shoes next to another pair that didn't look like mine. Something told me to check the bedroom camera. When I looked at that camera, there was no one in there, and the bed was still made for some odd reason. I kept flicking through the cameras until I caught my wife coming out of the laundry room with him behind her. She fixed her clothing, and he was buckling his pants. My heart shattered as I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Everything inside of me wanted to go home and confront both of them, but I thought about my kids and how losing both parents wouldn't benefit them. I shut everything in my office and, ashamed to say, I cried. I can't say how long it lasted, but it was long enough that my eyes felt swollen. After that, I knew what I had to do. As I headed home, I tried to compose myself for the argument that I knew was coming. I called a family friend and asked if the kids could stay over for a while so we could talk. They agreed. When I arrived home, my wife was cooking, and I could still smell the food like a prisoner's last meal. I sat down, and silence filled the air as I looked at her. I pulled out my phone and showed her the video of her and him coming out of the laundry room, and all I said was, "Why?" At first she tried to lie, even with the video evidence, but after a while of me pressing her, she finally broke down and told me the truth. She and him had been sleeping together for the last 3 years. We'd been married, and she might be pregnant with his child. She said she was sorry I had to find out this way, but now that it was all out, she wanted a divorce. It hit me hard because I came from a broken family and never wanted my kids to feel the struggle of having separated parents. After hearing that, I got up and went upstairs feeling defeated. I've worked my arse off to put this family on a pedestal, and it felt like someone just kicked it from under me. I wanted to harm myself so badly when I found out. But God works in mysterious ways because my daughter called me and told me she loved me. Not in those exact words, but it was what I needed to hear to help me get better. Hearing this story for the first time is gut-wrenching. It's hard to believe that someone can betray the trust of a partner in such a profound way, especially after so many years together and with kids involved. The pain and shock of discovering infidelity from both a spouse and a friend must feel unbearable, leaving a mix of anger, confusion, and heartache that's difficult to process. Anyway, that was the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you agree that cheating sucks. Check out the next video while you're still here. We bring our story to a close and continue with the next one.